Okay, welcome everybody. It is Sunday, December 13th, 2020, and we have with us Rebecca Bingham and Mary Pierz to share a little bit about growing up in the shadow of Temple Aaron.
And Ron Rubin.
Ron Rubin is here with us, and Neil Paul. So welcome everybody. Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you, Mary, for joining us for a chat today.
You're welcome.
You've reached out to us recently, and I don't know a lot of the history of the town of the town of Trinidad. So maybe you can tell us, when were you growing up there, and tell us a little bit about your childhood there.
Well, okay. Well, Rebecca and I grew up in the house that our great grandfather came to in about 1874. And it was already a house on 2nd Street, but it was an adobe house, possibly part of the Felipe Baca ranch, because he was a big cattleman in Trinidad at that time. And they came from Damascus, County, Maryland, via Lawrence, Kansas. And our grandfather was an infant when they moved to Trinidad. And his name was Joseph Asbury Bell. And his wife's name was Mary Pierz. And so Joseph Charles Bell, their son, who was our grandfather, grew up in that house. And my mother and her brothers and sisters grew up in that house. And Rebecca and I had the good fortune of growing up in that house also. So the temple was not built until 88 or 1889.
Right.
I'm right on that, or close.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't there originally, but it has always been there as long as we have been there. And we looked out on it from our back porch every day. We drove out of our garage. And I mean, as you pointed out, we literally grew up in the shadow of that temple. And when I heard in 2016 that it was being sold, I actually was physically ill. I was so worried that something would happen to it because it was so much a part of our lives. Not that we attended any services or anything there, but it was a huge imposing edifice that was always there. And if anything had happened to it, I couldn't even think about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad that it's being preserved and taken care of.
I'm wondering, what was the address? Do you remember the address of the home you lived in?
Yes.
We still own it.
Okay.
We still go there. It's rather like a sanctuary to us. We go there. I can pull my car into the garage. There's no Wi-Fi. There's no television. I can just go there and sleep or meditate or
That's great.
get away from it all. But it's 120 East 2nd Street.
Okay.
And so the temple is on the corner of 3rd and Maple. So the back of our property is on 3rd Street. And that's where we would go in and out the back from 3rd Street into the back of the house, into the garage. And so,
In fact, I was telling Neil that, and my mother would have been so embarrassed. I saw on YouTube a board meeting with people in it when maybe it was your first board meeting after the foundation had been started. And people were showing, Rubens were showing pictures. I think it was in one of your slideshows. You're looking north from the temple And there's some things. And then there's this old stucco garage with green garage doors and a
Okay.
big old house. That's us.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
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 That was
Okay.
a,
So
that was
you
a
got
different
to look at that ratty old garage.
That's funny.
Well, I just found it, I don't know, interesting, humorous. I just got a chuckle, Rebecca, when you said you lived literally in the shadow of the temple. It's like that's
Truly.
kind of a I don't know, mysterious or eerie or
Right.
whatever. But then when you said you used to sled down the street because the building literally put a shadow over it and kept it from melting. And then it was kind of hit me as, oh,
Yeah,
you literally did live in a shadow.
you're
We
right.
did literally.
Orient.
Yeah, this
Wow.
growing up in the shadow of it does kind of create kind of a mysterious feeling about it. But
Yeah.
it was mysterious in many ways because I never went inside until I was an adult. However, people did local community organizations like the Pierian Club and the AAUW, they would meet. I mean, there were a lot of organizations in Trinidad that would meet there. So I go into the lower area, but I have never been up. I don't know what into the sanctuary or into that area. I've never been there, but I think Rebecca.
And I have. And I went in once with my father. He was very good. Our parents were friends of the Gottliebs and B. Sanders and, everybody. And the last time I was in there was probably 1985. I was married at that time to a man, he's since deceased, and he was Jewish, and he came home with me. And he really wanted to go in Temple Aaron. And we contacted B. Sanders and went to her house and had a lovely tea with her. And then she led us into the temple. And so that was my most recent memory of being in there as an adult. But I know I was in there once as a child with my father. And when I was little, because there it was, this beautiful building, I mean, to me, it was very magical. And especially on Friday evenings with the Sabbath, and you would see the blue lights. And then that onion dome. I mean, like I said, it was magical and mysterious and enchanting. And that's from a child's point of view. It was just wonderful. And I guess it was, with that onion dome, that Mideastern flair. Of course, our father was an historian. And so he discussed architecture and all that with us. And the interesting thing Mary and I were discussing was we never thought, well, that's a Jewish temple or this is a Catholic church or this. It was just all where people go to be peaceful and kind and loving, more or less. Right, Mary?
And it was a very, very peaceful place. We played on the grounds. There's an area to the south of the temple that is a grass area. And soccer was not the game at the time. This was the 1950s. But we had a school across the street in the front. So we had a baseball diamond there. But we played a lot of kickball. We played a lot of hide and go seek around that building in the evening. We played a lot of games at night, and not all of them were played there. But it was, like I say, it was mysterious, but not in a negative way. It was, I always felt peaceful there. I always felt comfortable there. I was never afraid there. There's a steep drop off behind the temple to the west. And it's covered with scrub oak and pinyon trees and yucca. And there's all kinds of trails. And we used to play back there and hike. And we looked for what we called in those days, we called them horny toads, but they're horned toads. always went looking for horny toads. And a good friend of mine who lived across the street from the temple on Maple Street, she and I were the same age, and we were back in those bushes, and we found someone had been back in there, what we thought, well, we knew we shouldn't have been looking at it. It was a magazine. And it was pornographic, but we knew right away it was probably something we shouldn't have. But nevertheless, we took a good look at it. We were so afraid that our parents would find out. And, but we played a lot back there. We had, like Rebecca said, the temple kept the street from melting. So it was a wonderful street to sleigh ride on. And we just, if anything happened to it, it's kind of like the mountains to the west. If the mountains would suddenly disappear, then all my orientation would disappear. So if something happened to the temple, I would be totally disoriented because it was just part of our everyday growing experience. It was there.
Did you sled on 3rd Street or on Maple, that real steep street, or on the street right in front of the temple?
Both.
Both, okay.
But the one where it didn't melt was 3rd Street, which is kind of very steep and then tilted.
Right.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, that would be an awesome sledding hill.
Oh, it was.
Yeah. So I was telling Neil, I don't know, Ron, if you know any Trinidad people. Our father was Morris Taylor, and he taught at the junior college, and he was an historian and pretty principled with Arthur Roy Mitchell, the artist, in starting the Trinidad Historic Society and the Backhouse and Pioneer Museum. And this is a torn thing. He's since deceased and who knows. But he wrote a really interesting history book. It's called Trinidad, Colorado Territory.
Oh.
And his name's Morse Fenton Taylor.
I've got a copy.
And I was just kind of, there, she's got a nicer copy.
Sort of, yeah.
Hold it up a little bit more. Thank you. Thank you.
And it does make reference, you know, in the early days of the Jewish community, and what I'm on page 156. I don't know when he's talking about 18 something, but by this time the Jewish population had become very important part of the town and its business life. And it talks about Maurice Weiss was probably the first Jew to settle Trinidad in 1865. You know all this you know, and had the M. Wise and Company. And yeah, he talks about the Gottliebs and
there's
the
all
Moses.
Mhm.
Oh, I know.
The Jaffa brothers.
I mean, I remember Mr. Gottlieb. He was the little tiny, he was an old man in the 50s, you know. He was so cute and such a gentleman and so well dressed. I mean, these are people we remember of our childhood.
Yeah.
What?
He always tipped his hat to us. Yeah.
Always.
His wife, Olga, and his grandchildren would come from Kansas City to visit. We would play with them when they would come. So
yes.
Their last Mindlin, I think, Jan Mindlin.
Yes, Joan Minlin.
Joan, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see a copy of your dad's book, if there's a way to.
It might be.
No, it's out of print. I have seen it on eBay occasionally, and I have seen it on Amazon actually.
Really?
But they did republish it a few, probably 20 years ago. And there may be some copies around. I can check it out. I can find out. But there should be copies around somewhere. I'm not
Does
sure.
the museum have one in town?
Was that?
Does the museum in town have one?
I don't know. They
I
probably,
wonder if the public library would. The
Well-
college, the Freudenthal Library at the junior college might.
yeah.
That's probably true.
Oh. Mhm.
Mhm.
And
Would
then
be my guess.
there was another family, the Moses family,
Yes, Albert and Rita.
right? And they had a
Dry
Oh,
goods.
what- dry goods store on Commercial Street. And it was so unique. You would go in and and all the merchandise was out, and then you'd make your purchase. And then there was a basket on a pulley with a rope or something that they would either put your purchase in plus your money, and it would go upstairs to the second floor, and then they would make the change, and this basket would come back down, and you'd get. They would have your package wrapped if it was small enough for you, and you'd take it out of this basket. Now, as a child, going to Sunday school, we went to the Presbyterian Sunday school, but we learned all about Moses, and of course, our last name was Moses. And we learned all about how he was placed in this basket.
Oh my gosh.
And child brain
Are you breaking up?
with, I'm what?
Your
Somehow,
voice comes in and out.
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the sound is going in and out. Yeah.
That's okay.
Somehow my child brain made a connection between Moses and their last name and Moses in the back. And
That's
And I-
so-
remember a cousin of ours, my mother's sister lived there in Trinidad, and she was probably 4 or 5 years old and had a meltdown in the store.
Oh.
And I remember Mrs. Moses coming and trying to help my mother because she was screaming and kicking. I don't know, she wanted to buy something and she couldn't purchase it or something. And she was 4 or 5 years old and she just threw herself on the floor and was kicking and screaming, and we couldn't pick her up. And I remember poor Mrs. Moses was trying to comfort this child who was having this terrible temper tantrum.
Wow. Wow.
That is
But
fun.
yeah, and then of course the Jaffa House was all the Jaffa brothers, also the Jaffa Opera House there on the corner of Commercial Street and Main Street.
Yeah.
But that is in terrible, terrible condition and in danger of falling down. And I don't know, they want to preserve it in some way, but I don't know if it's at all possible. Yeah.
No, well, there's
You
some
know-
preservation work happening down there now. There's, I don't know if you've heard about some of those efforts going on.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Lots of things are happening, and the cannabis industry has helped that along a little bit too. There's,
The green for the
You had-
green.
did you
Well,
have,
but you know, Dana Crawford and
Yeah,
her
right, sure.
initiative, I mean, they're working to preserve the historic
Oh, yeah.
buildings. Yeah.
Yeah, just this past Friday, Thursday or Friday, there was
Mhm.
a kind of a lunch and learn Zoom meeting with Dana Crawford. And it was fascinating. We were
Mhm.
watching it.
It was with History Colorado. History Colorado
Right.
put it on.
History Colorado Museum put it on, and Dana spoke about Trinidad and some of the other historical preservation work she's doing. But anyway, it's good to good to see people putting effort into Trinidad.
well, it
Well,
has a lot to offer, and unfortunately, Trinidad gets a bad rap. You know, Rebecca and I are from Trinidad. Oh yes, we're so glad to be from Trinidad, you know. But you know, people kind of look down their noses at the area, but it has a lot historically to offer, and I think it has a future.
Well, there's a resurgence of interest now, I think, happening.
Why do you think it had a bad rap?
Well, because it's always been so economically depressed.
Well, it's been so boom and bust. I mean, at the time we're talking about here, it was pretty booming town and a really fascinating history. I was saying, you know, Bat Masterson was sheriff. I mean, all kinds of interesting things. And, but then the coal mining community was big. Oh, and our grandfather, actually, this sounds silly, but he was an attorney and he wrote the first labor law act of Colorado about the mines, the Ludlow mine massacre.
Wow.
And so to bring those labor laws in Colorado. So,
Okay.
Was that,
yeah,
was that after the Ludlow massacre that he wrote that law?
yes, I
Yes.
believe so. Yes, I think that's what promoted that.
He was an attorney in
And-
Trinidad?
Yes.
He was an attorney in Trinidad and Denver. He was a regent at the University of Colorado
What's the name?
for a time. He died in 1932. We didn't know him, you know.
Oh,
No, his name was Joseph Charles Bell. And
Oh,
he was the son of Joseph Asbury Bell. And as an infant, he came to the house we live in now. Sort of.
So
That's
was your
like the
maiden name
Chenoweths.
Taylor or Bell?
Our last name was, Rebecca and I are Taylor.
Taylor.
My last name was Bell. Her
My
parents,
mother's last name was Bell.
yeah, isn't that what I said?
Your voice went out.
Okay,
Our mother was a Bell.
yes.
Got it.
And our father came from
Got
New York. He came to school at the University of Colorado. And then he ended up at the junior college in Trinidad. And that's where he met my mother, who was teaching during the war because the other teachers and so forth had gone off to war. And so they offered her teaching position with the understanding that when they came back from war, that she would lose her position.
Hmm.
She would lose her job because, of course, the men, they wanted to give it back to the men. But so yes, her name was Bell. Our name was Taylor. We grew up in the house. My mother inherited the house. She was one of 8 children, but she inherited the house because she, in our grandmother's last years, took care of our grandmother. And
Hmm.
so,
No?
Yeah.
This warms my heart so much just to hear the two of you, because
oh, I imagine what.
I'm 69, and you may know my brother better than me. My brother Randy, who's over in Trinidad. Where do you live? You live in Trinidad? You said you live in a house now, right?
Well,
Or you
no,
visit
I
there?
live in
I don't live there now. My sister lives in Fort Collins. I'm in Austin, Texas.
Oh, okay, okay. Well,
But we own the house and we
Yes.
go. That's all.
We have sister hideouts there. It's our hideout.
it's nice to have that home, especially with all the family history. There's nothing to replace that. The home I grew up in the
We don't
50s.
Yeah.
We don't know what to do with it, and it's loaded with history, let me tell you.
Yes, yes.
Oh, I bet. I
It's nice
bet.
to be able to visit there. Well, the names that you mentioned, the Gottliebs, who were wonderful people and good friends of our family,
Mhm.
and Moses.
Mother was Catherine Rubin.
My my parents were Catherine and Leon Rubin, and of
From
course,
Rat-
yes, I grew up in Raton.
Well, I know, I met your mother at one point. I
She-
can't remember when. Now she's passed away, right?
Just 2 years ago, in 2018, she passed away. But she
Okay,
was
yeah.
at
Oh,
90.
she was, yeah. And weren't they they were from, her family was originally from Albuquerque, is that
Boy,
right?
you are sharp, Mary. Yes.
Oh,
My mom grew up in Albuquerque primarily, and
Uh-huh.
then she was introduced to my father, who's from Raton. His father, my grandfather, started Rubens
Oh,
in,
sure.
in
Oh,
19.
we know. I've been in that store many a time.
Okay, yes, and so we would go over and see the Gottliebs and the Moses. And were you ever in B. Sanders' house, or did you
Oh,
go in
yes.
the houses
Oh,
of the
yes,
people?
many times.
Yeah, she
We
was
were
a
also remembering one of our school teachers. What was her first name? Toff was her last name.
Edith Tauf, Miriam Edith Tauf.
Edith Toff was
Tauf, yeah.
taught at our elementary school.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Although
she was super many years.
Yeah, I never had her as a teacher, but I remember her as being very strict.
I was going to say, I'm sure she had a reputation of being very, very strict. In our
Wasn't she
Sunday school.
first grade teacher? She was
Yeah.
first grade, right? Yeah.
I was going to say probably the thing that people remember most is how strict she was. She was a pretty stern person, and and she used to sing in the choir at Temple Aaron also, and she had a beautiful voice.
Hmm.
She had sort of an alto voice, and she would sing when the others were there. If you saw her in the temple, she would give a very different. You would have a very different impression of her than in schools.
Oh,
but
I'm
she
sure.
she could be tough. And B. Sanders, of course, lived on Maple up at the end, maybe about 3 blocks. What is that? South?
Maple, yeah, South Maple and maybe 5th or 6th Street.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then did you, okay, so the Moses and the Gottliebs grew up on the other side where Colorado Avenue in Arizona and some of those Kansas streets are. So that was across the town.
Right. Yeah, Moses' house was on the corner of Pine Street and, oh, now I can't think. That's San Pedro, no. But yeah, and it's,
Was it Prospect? No.
And then the Seibolds, maybe you knew
oh yeah,
Lou and Yetta Seibold.
Yeah.
We were in their home a lot, and they would. I'm not sure where Edith Tauf lived, but anyway, yes, they all lived sort of on that side near the Chenoweths and some of those names.
Right.
now there was a doctor in Trinidad. I remember his son. I think his son is about my age. I'm 73. His name was Mike Barglow.
Yes, Dr. Barglow.
Yes. And he had a practice down on Main Street, I recall.
Okay.
But he died very tragically. He died in the Gulf of Mexico, drowned.
Ooh.
I don't know what the circumstances were, but I think he was part of the community as well.
Yes, he was. They were the Barglows. My mother mentioned them a lot. Their children were a little older than my brother and me, but the Barglows were prominent in the Jewish temple as well. Did you know the Moses daughters? Oh gosh, the Moses daughters were. I have some of their books here. They were older than you, and then we are. But the Moses had 2 daughters, Rose May, and I can't remember the other one. But anyway, they were older, the Moses daughters.
I don't remember them. I just remember Mr. and Mrs. Moses. Yeah.
Yes.
And Rebecca, you mentioned the Bibers kids, I think.
Yes, I grew up with Dr. Biber's daughter.
Joni and Bobby.
Yes, Joni. And in fact, probably the last time I saw her, my daughter, who's now 48, she's born in 72, and Joni had a little girl, and I wanted to say her name was Belle. Is that right? Do you know?
Joni's daughter, you said?
Yeah, Dr. Biber's daughter's little baby, who's a grown woman by now.
I don't know. You know, I've been in touch with Bobby, and in fact, I speak to him occasionally. He's a retired doctor also, and he lives in Evergreen, Colorado, near Denver. But I think didn't they have 4 or 5 children, I think?
Yeah, they did. So the last time I saw the one daughter, who's my age, and I'm 70, so I was born in 1950, my daughter, who was a baby, and her daughter was a baby, we get together and play. But yes, we all remember Dr. Biber very well.
Yes.
And not just because of his sex change operation.
No, right. Right.
Way before that.
Way before.
I mean, he was the prominent surgeon in Trinidad.
Right.
And he did a lot to save that community hospital by choosing to do what he did.
Absolutely true.
So I'm so curious.
No.
So growing up in a place where, you have this prominent physician doing sex change operations, I'm just so curious, like, how did that have an effect on, sort of the social fabric in terms of like, were people more open-minded to, open-minded to that sort of thing? I mean,
Well, here's
taboo.
an interesting thing. A few years ago, maybe 10 or 12, I don't know, a filmmaker did a documentary, and it was called Going to Trinidad. And it was all about this issue and how open-minded people were and so forth, because Dr. Biber saved that community hospital. When the coal mines closed, I mean, the economy basically collapsed. And he wanted to save, as I understand it, the hospital, and started doing this. And so this documentary is called Going to Trinidad. And I believe it even talked about how Dr. Biber, because Trinidad was predominantly, and probably still is, a Roman Catholic community, he went to the parish priest and talked to him. And according to this documentary, not my knowledge directly, the parish priest got a special dispensation from the Pope for this to be done to save this thing. Now, how true that is, I don't know. But
Well,
you might, if you could find that documentary.
because the hospital was a Catholic hospital run by the Sisters of Charity.
Yes.
Why they would have to have, some sort of
That is fascinating. That is absolutely
do these sex change operations. Yeah. But,
Wow.
In
interestingly,
fact, in the documentary, it suggests that some kind of, evangelical Bible beater, I know that's politically incorrect, but came to town and thought this was all wrong, and the community wanted him, they kind of chased this real evangelical guy out of town because their hospital was more important to them than this silliness,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm
Maybe that's all.
It makes me curious because, for example, like I have a teenage daughter, right, who's 15. And, she and her generation, they're very open, very liberal about all kinds of issues, very accepting, say, gay, lesbian, transgender, all that kind of stuff. And, to a degree that wasn't really the case, say when I was, her age. And so I just wondered, if there was more acceptance and openness in Trinidad or in that area.
Currently in Trinidad? I don't know. I mean, I haven't lived there since 1969. So,
Not currently.
But then, when you were growing up, was there? Or was it sort of kept sort of secret? I mean, or was it just out in the open? I mean, people,
Well, we had one fellow in high school that was, I don't know, he wore silver eyeshadow and did dressed in drag for the talent shows, and nobody disliked him for who he was. But I never thought about it. Didn't occur to me.
Yeah,
Did it you, Mary?
I think Trinidad has seen a lot of changes, and I think that Trinidad has at one time been a very open-minded community. I think it's kind of gone in the opposite direction in recent years. I know that it was a staunch Democratic stronghold, and not so anymore. But and Rebecca and I grew up, but then, growing up, we grew up in a household that was very liberal-minded and open-minded, and our parents. And so maybe we weren't aware of stuff that was going on in our community, but then there were very few minorities. There was one Black boy in our high school. His name was Richard Miller, and he played trumpet or something in the band, but I don't know. I think Trinidad was kind of a good place to be at one time. I'm not so sure, not so much now. But.
Well, I don't know, growing up and being in the minority as a Protestant, I used to dread Ash Wednesday
Oh, really?
because I didn't get those ashes on my forehead, and they'd chase me home from school and tell me I was going to hell. And I'd tell my mother, can't you just put a mark on my head? And she'd say, it will make you a stronger person.
Huh, that's
So
weird.
maybe
Wow.
it was open-minded, but you know, there's always that subtle stuff going on, right?
Yeah.
Ron,
Right.
Ron, what do you think? I mean, when you were growing up in the area, I mean, how did people, react to Dr. Biber and his work out there?
You're asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you.
Yes. Well, what Rebecca and Mary are saying is identical. We could be a twin, a shadow of each other's towns. Raton was also very liberal, very Democrat. It's now very Republican. It's very conservative. It has changed dramatically. It's not as tolerant as it used to be. My brother is definitely in the minority, still being Democrat, being a Democrat, and all of his friends are very strong Republicans, and at this point, supporting President Trump. But growing up, being Jewish was very much like Rebecca and Mary in that I didn't get the ashes on my forehead, although people didn't. Maybe boys were treated differently. They didn't chase us home, but everyone had these ashes on Ash Wednesday. And Raton was also, I would think 75, 80% Roman Catholic because
So
of
was
Hispanics
Trinidad.
and all of the coal miners and all the people who were from Eastern Europe, and Italian, were all Catholic. And so it was very much the same. But when we were growing up, I don't think Dr. Biber was doing any of the
No.
sex change. He was just a
No,
general.
no.
just
I
a
don't think
general
that started till 1969 or 70.
I think you're right. And I
I-
graduated from high school in 1969. So, it was well past when we were growing up.
I
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, it was. It was after I'd left to go to college. But I do remember when my daughter was little and my sister's daughter was little, and we go visit our mother, the grandmother, and we walk downtown from 2nd Street to Main Street to the bakery. And it seems like when these transgendered people had finally had their surgery and now these men were women, they all seemed to work in this bakery.
Yeah.
Maybe not. And I can remember taking these 2 little girls, and these women were just really tall and they all had pigtails, but Adam's apples. But I remember these little girls going, wow, these are big women. But I mean, that's
funny.
that kind of stuff. I didn't really explain anything to them. I said, oh yeah, pretty big women.
Yes, they, a lot of them after their sex change, he also did remove the Adam's apple. Dr. Biber did incredible things. Of course, he couldn't reduce the size of the hands, but he would do that. And they got a lot of psychological counseling. I think B. Sanders actually did some of the counseling for these people.
Is that right?
Yes, and she was.
And I think, didn't they have over on Chestnut Street, the same, not the same block as the temple going east, but as our house. I think there was like a recovery home there. I don't know. I think so. Do you know where I mean on Chestnut, Mary? You know where the Campbell Lewis mortuary was? So it was on Chestnut Street, just a couple houses up from.
Oh, yeah.
2nd.
And we would see occasionally, a lot of them did stay. Maybe they were required to after the surgery to see how everything was going. But we saw these also abnormally very large women in Trinidad walking around or in a store. And my brother and I, it was such a quizzical curiosity, sort of. You would see them. And I think that the people of Trinidad were very accepting. And they were just part of a very small minority, but a fabric of the community in that way as well. And I think he was respected. I don't think Dr. Biber was looked down upon by the citizenry.
No. I don't think so either. Not at all.
Highly respected, yes.
Hmm.
Yeah.
This is so
Yeah,
interesting.
it really is. I really enjoyed it.
You had some questions for us, so I think we've just blabbed. And did we answer any?
No, this is fine.
Uh,
I don't have any other questions, but do you, or Ron, do you have any?
Well, let's see. It's so wonderful to hear you speak about this around the same time that my brother and I were going over for Sunday school, because we'd come over on Sundays also, besides on Friday night as well. And then, of course, the Jewish high holidays, which are in September and October. Then the temple was a hubbub of activity, and there was so much going on during September and October. And we played on the little, I don't know, some people called it the graveyard, but the little grassy area to the south or to the
Right.
and we played there all the time, played football, but we were never there when any of you or the townspeople were there, because we were just there during
Right.
services.
That wasn't your magazine, was it?
Oh, you have to ask that. Yeah.
Not our magazine.
Oh, you have to go there. That's funny.
Uh,
Your brother.
Ask your brother. No.
but I can remember.
Our mother, go ahead, Mary, you speak.
I was just going to say, I can remember rolling around in that grassy area as it was getting dark, and it was a good place. You could stare up at the stars. There weren't any in the way. Yeah, and it was we just felt so safe there. We could just play and be anything we wanted.
Did you ever pick any of the apples off the apple tree in the front? There's a big apple tree. I don't know how old it is. It may not be old enough, but now it still gives apples, and it seems to be ancient. And if we're down during the Jewish holidays, sometimes I'll pick some of the apples, just because I feel like that they're special and they're magical, since they grow on the land where the temple is. So that I love to hear about the temple and the majesty of it, and
Yes.
how it was so neat.
And it still is. It still is.
Really special.
So I've sent to a lot of my friends this week. I've sent, I think it's your website. So I'm hoping I'm going to get some donations out of my friends.
Oh, how nice.
Oh,
Maybe.
Rebecca.
Yeah.
I'm trying. Michael Dell lives here in Austin, and I thought, I wish I had a connection to him. I bet he'd help out. I'm trying to figure that one out.
Yeah, we're working to raise money right now to do some major work
Yeah.
on it. But I was going to say, I don't know if either of you, if you come down to Trinidad, maybe after coronavirus subsides, let us know, because we could, meet you there or show you around or what have you. Or if your visit coincides, with one of the holidays or something, please join us.
I think the next actual physical event we hope plan to, if COVID cooperates and a vaccine, will be Passover, which is around the time of Easter.
Right.
Right.
So,
April. Early
whatever.
April.
But yeah, just let us know.
Well, Mary and I used to try to get together at least once a year, and we'd always go to Trinidad because we're slowly trying to clean out the basement of Mother's house, which may never ever be done. So that would be fun. And we usually don't. Mary doesn't like me to come in August because the house doesn't have air conditioning. I'm in Texas. That's when I want to be. So it's usually spring or fall. That's kind of both Jewish holidays, right?
Right, yeah, the
Passover.
fall would be a good time. I bet we'll be able to have Rosh Hashanah services in the fall. We did do it this year. We had a socially distanced service at Rosh Hashanah. So if you do come in September, that would be likely. that we'd be down
Hopefully
there.
we'll have our vaccinations. We might still be in masks, but
Yeah.
that's okay too.
Yes.
I'm not gonna let Trump kill me.
Ah,
I'm sorry. That was not nice of me.
Yes.
Oh, totally fine.
It's
Totally
okay.
fine.
you're safe here. You are safe here.
Good, Because I'm in Texas.
We
I
were.
just want.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Well, she's in Austin though.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm in
Austin is
Austin. Austin's
Yeah.
a liberal place in Texas,
Yes.
you
The
know,
only one.
for the
Yeah.
most part.
So now, Ron, where do
Um,
you, Ron, you live in Raton?
No, my brother still lives in Raton. He's lived there his entire life, like my father, who was born in 1920 and died in 2013 and had the store. It was the oldest store in New Mexico, still operating when it was. It was almost 100 years. But we moved to Colorado Springs, my wife and I, in 1980.
Oh, it's right.
So we lived there after I graduated from college for about 5 years. No, yeah, 7 years, and then moved here. So I graduated from Colorado College in Colorado Springs in 1973, and then went back
Okay.
to Raton and stayed in the store for the next 7 years. And we live in Colorado Springs and have 2 children, one of whom lives here and one is in Israel with his family.
Nice.
So we would go for a mad dash over the pass. None of the Trinidad Jews had to do that, but we'd make a mad dash for either Sunday school. My mom was hell on wheels as a driver because we were always late. And so we'd drive over the pass and go to Sunday school or to Friday night services. And there were times when Colorado had daylight savings and we didn't. So we'd have to leave at 5 to get there at 6:30 because it'd be an hour and a half instead of just a half hour. And when we come back, we'd leave at maybe 8 and we'd get back at 7:30. We'd get back a half hour before we left.
Wow.
So,
That's worth flag.
but
That's fast driving.
You're in Denver then?
in Colorado Springs,
Okay, yeah.
yes, only about 2 hours from Trinidad.
And Neil and Sherry are in Denver, right?
Littleton.
Denver area,
Littleton. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
part of the.
Yeah.
Well,
When you
I'd
go,
like to keep in touch because I think it would be fun when Mary and I get to go to Trinidad, it would be very
I
nice.
hope so.
That would be fun. My
Yeah.
grandfather, Joseph Charles Bell, he was an amateur photographer, and we had a basement full of these old glass plates with his photography. And I have another cousin who is trying to digitize all that. And
Wow.
I come across any photos of the temple or just having the temple in the background. I'm hoping that I will. So far I haven't. I have one photo that you can barely see it in the background, but I have a feeling there's more there. So,
That
and
would be
I-
Love
wonderful.
to have those.
yeah, I would love to share those with you if they exist,
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Sherry has put on our website some of the old photos and drawings of Temple Aaron. So if you haven't gone to the website and do a little exploration, she's done an incredible job of recounting the history through pictures and through text and just a lot about Temple Aaron. When we put it for sale and the sign went up in front, my brother and I, it was very, very emotional. So
Oh, yeah.
I'm so thankful that it didn't happen.
Oh, it
We
was.
are too. We were emotional and you didn't even know we existed.
Yes, that's right.
No, it really, when I heard about the possible demise, it made me physically ill. It just because I
Thank
can't
you both
describe.
for reaching out. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I'm
Sorry,
finished.
I didn't mean to cut you off. The sound went out again.
Yeah. I told your husband this is very silly, me and my childish thinking maybe, but when I heard it was on the market and my friend who is from Israel that's here in Austin, and he's a businessman and he's always in Israel. And I told him about it and I had a newspaper article from the Denver Post or something Mary sent me. And I said, Arya, can you not go and tell Netanyahu about this?
Rebecca,
I think I'm that
you're really trying.
I said, you can give it a try. but I don't think he ever tried.
Well, I'll tell you, in speaking to a few rabbis, their point is more the importance of synagogues and temples are the community more
Yes.
so than the physical structure.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
I came along and Sharon and I got involved when we heard it was for sale. So it was about
Yeah.
the physical structure. And over the last few
Yes.
years, we're kind of rebuilding a community in a way that it's surprising and it's delightful. It's wonderful. But
And
the point is now
isn't
we have
that,
all the rabbis.
but I've always thought that it was kind of, and I don't know anything about anything, but community is very important in the Jewish faith.
Yes.
Community.
Sure.
Very.
And
Sure.
so when we were thinking about when the synagogue was open to different meetings in the community, that's part of them opening their arms to the community and the community coming in. But maybe I just made that up in my own mind.
No, there was lots and lots of that. We had during the Jewish holidays, between the beginning of it and the end of it, we always had an interfaith tea.
Yes.
Connected about 100 or more people, and B. Sanders had it, and my mother had it, and usually there was a rabbi there. So you're right, it did a lot. We just wish there would be some Jews who would move to Trinidad. Everybody fled, and with the Renaissance of Trinidad, maybe there will be.
What's that, Mary?
I can't think of a single one anyone who lives there now.
There's one, Larry Lowe, L-O-W-E, I think, and he's a chiropractor. He lives in Trinidad and he's Jewish. And there are a couple of others, but they're not quite as involved as Larry is. Sometimes they'll come, or they're from Stonewall, or from Primero, or Honey, or Levita, and so they'll come in, and they're from the surrounding area, but they don't live in Trinidad proper. But there's a woman who just moved there, right?
Yeah.
So maybe we'll have a renaissance.
But what's really special is now with technology, we could build a community that, crosses many, many miles, even crosses oceans.
Sure.
So whether you live in Trinidad or you live in another country, another state, you could be part of this community, this Temple Aaron community, without physically being there. And then hopefully someday you might give people a purpose to travel to Trinidad just to see the temple, or just to see the town, and maybe go down to Santa Fe, whatever.
Pilgrimage.
But before we leave, what's that?
I said it could
I'm
be
sorry.
a pilgrimage.
Yes,
A
exactly.
pilgrimage.
Yeah.
A destination point, yeah.
Are
Right.
you members of Trinidad, the Trinidad group? We're members of.
Friends of Historic Trinidad.
I am, yes.
Yes.
Our father, Morris Taylor, he was instrumental in starting that organization as well.
There's
Okay.
600 people who are members, 600. Rebecca, you must join. It's very expensive, however. It's $10
$10 a year.
a year.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I should. I always leave it to my big sister to take care of all those wonderful things
you'll
for
see
me.
all kinds of
Maybe I
things.
better step up to the plate.
You'll see all kinds of names of people who who are part of it. Oh, it'll bring back a flood of memories. And unfortunately, there are also a lot of deaths now. So they have a newsletter twice a year, I think, and in there they have some of the people who have died, and it's sad to see some of those names of people.
Yeah.
Well, I went to my 50th class reunion in 2018, and that was kind of interesting, kind of not. I've been gone so long,
Yeah.
That's my problem. I've been gone, more than 55 years. Really
Long as you've been there.
Yeah.
Before we go, I just want to make sure. I hope that we have your permission to use this on our website, so that we could hopefully build maybe a separate chapter of the website with stories like this. Hopefully you, the two
Okay.
of you.
I don't know if we've added anything to this,
Yeah.
but
That we
Absolutely.
oh,
contributed.
quit looking at your face.
Now, Mary, we'll edit out your neck.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Didn't, you know, you
Ron's
remember,
got his hidden with that beard.
See,
yeah,
I've got mine
You're-
hidden.
Nora Ephron.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was, I think it was her last book was called "I'm Sorry About My Neck."
That's the neck.
Oh,
That
no.
Last books, and I've never forgotten that. I loved her.
Yes. Yeah, she's great. She's hilarious.
Yeah, hilarious.
Yeah.
It's
So
been a
this is-
Anyway, well, this was fun. It was fun actually meeting you, and I guess I wasn't totally ridiculous to make that just phone call from this stranger to that number. So
I'm glad you did, Rebecca. It's really.
I'm glad I did too. It's been great. So I was going to tell you, I heard on our National Public Radio today they are having some cantors from Wisconsin, and I wish I'd written down the website, but it's for Hanukkah for tonight.
Oh.
So it's
Ooh,
supposed to be
really?
very lovely if you want to Zoom there or go online and listen.
Well, thank you.
Very
Yeah,
nice.
that's-
Thank you.
Okay.
And if I find some